Welcome to Connected. I'm your host, Haley Trimboli, and whether you're a PhD curious or you are navigating your program or you're wondering what your fellow graduates are up to, this podcast is your go-to for inspiring stories, actionable insights, and meaningful connections within the PhD community. Today's guest on Connected is Dr. Lawrence Cornell Carter, a dynamic educator, executive board representative, and a lifelong advocate for educational equity with a doctorate in organizational leadership from Grand Canyon University. Lawrence has spent over a decade shaping student outcomes as a teacher, a coach, and a leader in public schools. From managing athletic budgets to conducting district-wide research on culturally responsive pedagogy, his journey reflects deep dedication to student-centered leadership. And a fun fact is me and Lawrence go way, way back to my very first job. We were actually colleagues back when I think I was 15. He might have actually been my boss at one point at local community pool where we were lifeguards and swim instructors, and we both went to Sacramento State together. So it's super, super fun to have Lawrence on the show today. I'm super excited. So welcome to the show, Lawrence. Where does this podcast find you today?
Hey, great to be here. I am in beautiful Elk Grove, California. Elk Grove, yes.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, let's just jump right in. And we're going to start with sort of this pre-PhD era for you. And what I want to first unpack with you is what initially drew you to pursue a doctorate in organizational leadership, and why did you choose Grand Canyon University?
Absolutely. So I would say my family, I kind of come from a family of educators. And so my mom, she was a speech pathologist, so she was always in schools and working around schools. And so I always felt relatively familiar with how K through 12 schools work. But at the same time, I also had an uncle who was he was a dean at one of the more prestigious, I guess you'd say, research tier one type of schools. And so that always kind of showed me like, oh, there is another level of academia that's above K through 12. And I was always very curious about that ever since I was probably 12 or 13 years old. Even going through my bachelor's and master's, I kind of always knew like, okay, if possible, I want to get my doctorate. I didn't really know what getting my doctorate meant, but I always wanted to pursue a doctorate. And so that was kind of how I got on that pathway. Grand Canyon University specifically. So one of my peers at my first teaching position, he had some information about the school. His wife had worked for the school. And so upon getting some of their enrollment information, I was curious and excited about the opportunity to enter a doctoral program. And also, especially at that time, I had seen some very interesting programmatic requirements for specifically EDD programs as well. And so things like maybe 10 years of experience being needed, or already being at a senior management level position within an organization before applying. And so the fact that Grand Canyon, I felt like, didn't have those types of barriers and roadblocks, I felt like it made the program a little bit more enticing to me as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I definitely want to unpack the fact that you had people around you who were in academia, but still not even knowing what that journey looks like. I think that's really sort of the intention also around this podcast, is that it still can seem so unfamiliar, even if you are surrounded by folks who have gone through that process. Also, what drew you specifically to organizational leadership in that particular program? Like, were you already kind of thinking about that in your work that you were doing, or you knew sort of way back that this was a topic that others have explored or something that you wanted to dive into?
So I would say with organizational leadership, throughout my professional experiences, throughout my different teaching appointments, the majority of administrators that I had worked for, they were always kind of like, hey, like, you should be an administrator. Like, hey, you have administrator written on you. And even within different professional instances, I always took things very serious. I've always been someone that within my department, other people will look up to, or they'll look at me as the model to kind of base what their practice is. And so in terms of being a leader, I've always felt like I was a leader, whether by title or not by title. but I felt like the organizational leadership aspect just gave a real expertise into just understanding how organizations operate, kind of the formal, the informal, what to do in terms of in times of turmoil versus when the times are good, how to, manage the budget, how to manage different personalities. And so I really felt like organizational leadership was the perfect setup to be really any type of administrator, but even more specifically, a higher education administrator. And so that's kind of how I settled in on that. But my bachelor's degree, it was a bachelor's of kinesiology with an emphasis in physical education teaching. And then my master's was a master's of arts in adult education and training. And so I kind of felt like organizational leadership, kind of a much more broad and oversight type of perspective, I felt like was best at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely seems like you were kind of working up to that point where you had maxed out maybe like what you were actually applying from the bachelor's, from the master's. Other folks are telling you like you'd be perfect for administrative type of roles. And so it just seems like such a great fit for you. And I also wanted to actually go back to something that you said around choosing Grand Canyon University and how it was just accessible for you. I think this is a really interesting thing. And it actually was part of my journey as well, like choosing a program that was accessible. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Like thinking about folks who might be choosing a program and wondering, do I go to an R1 institution? Do I go to sort of maybe a fully online program or a hybrid program? Like what sort of insight might you be able to share around like access to uh, a doctoral program for a student and things to be thinking about as you're choosing that kind of place that you're going to land for a handful of years?
Absolutely. So we are ready to cook. So I would say in terms of school selection, I think that the biggest thing is first of all going to be philosophy on what your goals are. And so what I mean by that is that if you want to, if you're looking to be a researcher at a very high level institution, you are going to probably need to go to a high level institution in order to get those experiences, make those connections, build that network, even have access to certain opportunities. But the reason that I think that it goes back to kind of a more philosophical mindset type of perspective is that I remember during, I think it was my first course during my doctoral program. And, some students will be thinking like, well, what career path am I on? Or what job am I going to get? Or how am I going to get from the degree to my job? Whereas I believe it was in the literature, I think it was the first book that we were instructed to read. And it was saying that at the conclusion of earning your doctorate, you should have the skills to build your own job, right? And so I think that it really depends on what your individual focus is. And kind of like I was saying, just that alignment of, if you want to be a world renowned or nationally renowned researcher, you're probably going to need to be at one of those tier one level institutions, opposed to if your focus is more for professional reasons, if it's more for career advancement, if it's more for skill development and skill building, then that's going to be, just a different focus. Now, another thing that I would say, and this is probably better for later on when we talk about the actual dissertation, but I would also say that when it comes to choosing a state school or a public school versus a private school, I would say that I found there to be many differences there in how those types of institutions operate, in a sense of how long it may take to complete your program, in a sense of maybe the length of a dissertation or what a dissertation may look like. Those would be also some key things that I would kind of address if I was looking to, advise someone going into a doctoral program, or if I was doing it again. I would literally go find dissertations from those schools. I would go find people from those schools and actually have those real conversations with them, just so that, like we were saying, just so that you know what you're getting into. Because I think that that's kind of one of the biggest issues with doctoral education. I think that even previous to going into it, I would look at all the statistics and I would see, oh, okay, like there's X amount of people entering these programs, and okay, they already have a master's degree. What would be the reason that people are not finishing these programs? And some of those things, just like I had said, estimated time of completion, access to resources, changes in your doctoral committee, all of those sorts of things could have an impact on that. And so it's really important to know those things before getting involved. But yeah,
Yeah, that's huge. I love it. I mean, I think there's a lot that you just shared right there, that could be super helpful. I mean, I really just appreciate it starts with your goals. And I think what you outlined is that it can kind of feel like there's one path where there's one right way and there's not. And it really does start with what you're looking to achieve and then sort of plugging in those different factors that might help you to achieve success toward that goal. And I think the PhD journey is transformational kind of in and of itself. So, something might change along the way, but at least having that starting point to make that initial decision and then doing a little bit of research up front, I think it's super important. Looking at those different things that you had mentioned, whether it's the type of university, even the acceptance rate, like I think those are really helpful aspects once you do start with your goal to like really start narrowing down on the place that you might want to land, at least from that starting point, right? Like at least to get you started and then kind of see where it goes. So you have worn many hats, from PE teacher to a dance teacher to a coach. I mean, referee. I mean, we talked swim instructor, right? So what I'm trying to look for here is how did these experiences, like in the classroom, teaching people in the gym, etc., coaching, like how did those maybe shape also your decision to pursue this doctoral degree?
absolutely. So I definitely would say that, especially just like you so eloquently stating, starting off as swim instructors and lifeguards. As a younger person, I didn't really understand how special that type of profession was. But especially as a PE teacher, as somebody who just finished their doctorate, as a referee, I think that the skills that you learn within a lifeguard and swim instructor, they're very transferable into these different things. And so even just a quick example, when we were lifeguards and we're taught, you need to scan the pool from the lowest levels all the way to the top. You need to have the scanning pattern. Those same types of things apply when I was coaching basketball and I'm looking at the defense and I'm understanding, okay, this is where the leaks are in their defense for our offense to kind of exploit so that we can score more points. Or when I'm teaching PE and I'm looking at, a field, a football field full of students and being quickly able to identify, okay, where's Tommy? Okay, I need to go get Tommy this note so he can go to the office, right? Now, I think that the biggest thing that I've found that has worked for me from my doctoral experience into my professional experience is really just understanding that I'm a systems person and a systems decision maker, and I'm also very good at generating data. And so being able to kind of really know what students are learning, being able to really even present a personality and a character that students really vibe with and gel with, someone who's authentic within their career, to the students as well as to the professional elements of the organization or the professional development or the collaboration aspects. But I really think that just kind of like Lauryn Hill said in her old song, everything is everything. And I think that being able to have the experiences from getting your doctorate, I think that those, when you take that into the professional realm of education or teaching or even, union work, I think that it's really crucial just because you've had experiences that, are a little bit different. I remember during certain times of my doctorate program, I remember the emotional aspect of it and being so frustrated that at times I was, very upset. I remember other times where I was, so excited that I felt like I could have ran 10 miles without even stretching. Just a variety of experiences that you go through. Even understanding how to finance your life while you're going through a doctoral program, how to balance your time, how to manage the multiple aspects of your doctorate. Like I always tell people, getting your doctorate is almost like being a solo entrepreneur, right? It's like you have to do the background work to have the literature that says that what you're studying is even something to study. But then you also have to be able to come up with the plan. You have to be able to get other people to approve your plans. Some being internal from your school or internal from, where you're going to get your doctorate. but others being people that you maybe have never talked to or never even seen before, and getting them to buy into your program, then actually getting, your participants to buy in and having the time to conduct the actual interviews, then taking time to analyze the interviews, then taking the time to write it up, and taking the also additional time to edit, and then going back to get more approvals. And so, just like I was saying, I think that it really tests all of your abilities and capabilities, because it's not just one thing. It's not just, you know, go be a presenter and stand in front of people and present it, but it's all the other parts of it that I think can become very tedious. And so I think that when you've had those experiences, I always like to say that when you've defended your dissertation, then, giving a professional development is a little bit easier because you've been in some of these more pressurized situations. And so I really feel like it's been a very strong benefit just to have those experiences. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say about that. Just the experience being so invaluable.
Yeah, I love this so much. I mean, I feel like to me, the whole thing is centered around your skill sets and like what you really honed in on is that one, like, people have strengths, right? And you recognize your strengths, and then that lends you to really lean into those areas, particularly once you get into the program. But you have these strengths from before, like everybody has these based on your experiences. And then knowing, and when you're in your program, is like everybody's coming with something different and not necessarily comparing, but just recognizing these are my collective strengths. And then, oh, okay, like here's the area now I have to lean into because this wasn't one of my strengths, etc. And then also, I feel like what you were sharing, which is so important, is this idea around transferable skills. I think that it goes back to the notion that before you even get into a PhD program, it's going to be transformative, but you have so many skills that you have developed. And like, I just feel like what you honed in on there is that like you knew what your strengths were. And then, I think that's such a key step to this program that you're going to be kind of transforming yourself on and growing in other areas, whether those strengths or weaknesses or opportunities. So, one final question in this sort of pre-PhD era, maybe like in one sentence or less, like what was your goal going, like your biggest hope, your biggest goal when you went into the doctoral program?
I would say my biggest goal was really was first of all to get to the highest levels of education. I mean, I think even achieving it, you still are kind of sometimes you're still a little bit open ended in like where exactly is this leading to. But I always kind of wanted to be some type of higher education, either a very esteemed professor or some type of administrator. Specifically, what I wasn't exactly sure. Another another thing that this has kind of made me think about was a lot of times I'll run into people that don't really know the differences between the PhD and the EDD, and even sometimes there may not be super significant differences. Whereas in theory, the PhD being somebody who is creating new theories or who is specifically analyzing previous theories versus the EDD being more of a practitioner, somebody who is using this theory to either further prove or disprove, or I guess maybe make more efficient or make better usage of something that's already been created. And so I think that in theory, just knowing that there are kind of two different pathways, one being more theoretical, one being a little bit more action based. I think that that is a key component for anyone who's looking into to doctoral programs as well. I also think that in terms of thinking about your outcomes, kind of like we spoke about earlier. For me, with my bachelor's, I knew exactly what I was getting into. With my master's, I kind of felt like, okay, I know that training is a part of, pretty much any education apparatus that a company is going to have. And knowing that companies do have, an educational apparatus or things that the employees within a company do have to learn how to do, and there's someone responsible for that. But when it came to the doctorate, I kind of wanted to look at leadership from within higher education organizations. Now, I did when I was graduating and when I kind of looked around and saw some of the other people that were, I'm not going to say in the cohort because we didn't have cohorts, but some of the other people who graduated at that same time. And I would see some of these doctoral degrees that, at least from my perspective, were not as streamlined or defined as to what you would get into afterwards. And so maybe things such as I saw someone get a doctorate in theology, And I was kind of like, okay, well, I'm not sure exactly what that leads to. Maybe a professor of theology, maybe there are specific schools where maybe the theology would be seen as more valuable than other schools. But I didn't see, I've seen how for some people their PhD or ed doctorate may not be as aligned to their career aspirations. And I would just say that alignment is very key. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that is key, and I think that's super helpful. I don't think that we've ever, like, unpacked that on this show of the differences between the EDD and the PhD, and I think that is an important thing to think about and kind of decide on based on potentially the outcomes, at least thinking enough ahead of the curve that you can make sure. I mean, it's an investment, right? I mean, if you think about making smart investments, like, it's not going to be perfect, but you do need to think a little bit strategically about that big investment that you're making financially with your time, etc., and not be too whimsical about it. To some degree. And so I think that, yeah, I appreciate you unpacking those differences there and that, and just ensuring that you have some sort of direction on how is it going to enhance you? Like, how is it going to help you grow or get to some place, and starting with the end in the mind. And so let's go into your PhD journey, like in the PhD program itself, you get in. So let's just jump in right to your dissertation, which is just so foundational to the PhD journey. So, what did you study, and then I know what you studied, but I'll let you explain it. And then, what did you discover about, emotional regulation, teacher decision making, in these culturally responsive classrooms?
Absolutely. I think that when it comes to the dissertation process, just in general, I think that the dissertation, when you're looking at the whole entirety of your doctorate program, with the dissertation being the most intense and intensive portion of it, while also, it happens a little bit later when you're into it. And so the school that I went to, we did some things throughout the courses, such as I think it was gathering about 10 articles that should be part of your literature review per class. But the dissertation was not really truly spoken of or explained until I was about 4 years into it. And so I think that with that, that was a very interesting aspect. Also, initially, the topic that I was studying. So initially, I wanted to kind of see why it was that I think the statistics were saying 1 in 3 Black males were graduating from college. And that initially was kind of what I went into my program wanting to study through, I guess you would say, the literature review, research gathering, and through working with my dissertation chair at the time. I was able to kind of find culturally responsive pedagogy as a result of the gap or problem space area. And so I was able to find culturally responsive pedagogy, which was slightly different, but still related, still educational equity centered, and also specifically looking at how teachers and their ability to regulate their emotions, as well as understand what they're looking at in their classroom, how that plays out into the academic success of students. And so understanding that students, they come from their own unique background, they come from their own unique life experiences, cultural experiences. And so there are times when, especially, for me being a teacher, you may see something in your classroom and not understand the cultural context towards it. And that also was found within the data. I remember specifically one of the teachers, they had said that within one specific cultural group, they found that young boys are a little bit more touchy, a little bit more grabby. They're a little bit more kind of, they're a little bit more physical than what they would see out of the female students. And so, kind of understanding that cultural context and being a teacher, understanding that you're there for the success of the students, figuring out how to kind of have that tough conversation with them of, hey, I understand you may do this at the park, or I understand you may do this, at home, when there's a soccer game playing with your cousins, but inside of the realm of school, inside of the context of education, inside of the scheme of keeping everyone safe, we can't grab each other or jump on each other. And also that not necessarily having to be, a go home for 5 days suspension or a crazy remediation from a PBIS coordinator or from a principal, but that can be a quick conversation. And through that quick conversation, you not only are building trust from teacher to student, but you're also really teaching them, you're really teaching, you're authentically teaching. It's not just about the academic content, but it's about changing behavior, figuring out appropriate behaviors for different places and settings, not only within school, but within the local community as well. And so I think that it was very impactful and insightful to do this study. But also, what I was able to find was that essentially, culturally responsive teaching, teachers' ability to regulate emotion within their job setting, and then making culturally influenced decisions or database decision making with culture in mind is not something that is being taught at all through teacher education programs, through teacher, I guess you would say, induction programs, or really through a variety of a lot of the professional developments that are taught. And so I thought that it was a very insightful study. I felt like it was very unique for me to hear from so many different teachers. There were let's see, I believe it was, wow, it's been a little while since I did the research, but there were three different focus groups with a minimum of three and a maximum of eight, and then I believe 19 individual semi-structured interviews. And so just to get 19 different perspectives on, what does this look like in your classroom? And also the different teachers, there was a variety of different types of teachers, from elementary school teachers to high school teachers to mathematics teachers to English teachers to Spanish teachers to, I guess you'd say, restorative practice type teachers. And so, really, just getting a very wide purview and a very kind of exploratory understanding of how these teachers, their process really works. And a lot of what I found too was really, these are things that are just good teaching, right? Understanding your students, knowing who they are, knowing what makes them motivated, knowing how to, just handle people problems. And people problems are part of the educational process. And so
Hmm.
I feel like as a professional, I learned a lot from this experience, and I also think that, kind of like you were saying, with your doctoral experience, I think that the big thing to understand is that who you are when you start your experience is not going to be who you are when you finish, based on those experiences that we've spoken of, right? And so I think that even for my students within K through 12, they understand, like, oh, okay, he has a system of doing things maybe a little bit more different. He really does, like, authentically want to know that I understand this. He really is going to assess this. Even as a physical education teacher, when let's say something like playing football, yes, we play football, but there is also an expectation that you're going to, learn the different routes, understand the field positions, understand different offensive and defensive strategies, understanding different maybe signs that would kind of let you know, oh, okay, I can tell that they're going to go this way because I can see their eyes and they're looking at this and they're looking at that. And so just always going deeper than just, oh yeah, we're throwing the football around. It's like that, to me, is not really truly authentic learning. You need data points. You need to give opportunity to be able to say, okay, in the beginning, this is where we were, and this is where we built to, and this is where it eventually can lead up to. And so I think that the doctoral process really did change who I am as an educator. And so.
Hmm. Yeah, amazing. And so it sounds like from your dissertation, you still have a big opportunity of looking at, potentially, why is this not being taught in teacher preparation programs, or, why is this not being taught in professional development for teachers? And so, it sounds like you did a lot of research to show maybe the value of this. So I guess my question, some folks might do a dissertation and they realize that is not where I want to continue going. Like for you, was that, do you see like, oh yeah, I got to keep going on this topic. Like I found something, I'm going to move this forward in some sort of way. Or are you like, thank God I'm graduated, and then, a done dissertation's a good dissertation. And, here we are. So just curious to kind of see for you how you're kind of seeing this next step for yourself and how that relates to the dissertation work that you found and did, etc.
Absolutely. And so kind of getting into this question, I would kind of go back into the dissertation process just a little bit, just so that I could kind of give a little bit more of an explanation. And so I remember someone about a year ago, or yeah, about a year and a half ago, and they were working on their master's degree, and they were kind of looking for tips on writing their thesis. And I remember giving them some advice about, when you write a dissertation or a thesis or a body of work that is that large and that expansive and that takes that much time, you know, that is going to be something that you individually specifically are known for, right? And so I think that when it comes to the dissertation, I've seen a lot of people that take the dissertation as like a series of tasks that they need to complete, or they look at it as, oh, it's just that last thing that I need to do to get done. Whereas it needs to be thought of as like a living, breathing document, something that, like we said, you literally will be known for. It will be published underneath your name. I know even mine is trademarked underneath my name. And so I think that when it comes to the dissertation, the physical paper, that is one thing, and then the experience is something else. And so for me, I started my dissertation program in 2017 and I finished in 2025. When I started, it was underneath, our program is 60 units and it will take 3 years to finish. And that clearly was not the case. And so I think that, and with that, there were kind of a variety of different things that were part of that. So I had four different dissertation chairs. I had three different methodologists. And so each one of those changes, those different professors and instructors, they had different expectations of what they were expecting at each of the different junctions. So that could be what a chapter is expected to look like. That could be the prospectus to proposal, proposal to the actual dissertation. And so I think that with the experience that I personally had, it was a lot of dealing with the mental frustration individually. So waking up every day and saying like, how much longer are we going to be doing this? Or dealing with different time delays, dealing with different instances or issues that maybe the dissertation chair could have been having at the time that could have been creating delays or creating bottlenecks. Also, kind of structural, I guess you would say, systematic instances that kind of came from the school that I went to. And so, just like I was saying, I think that that experience of going through 7.5 years of being a working professional, doing the research, going to work every day, dealing with the different people at work, getting off work and doing the different parts of the research and parts of the project, I think that those elements of it, they really created a situation where I feel like I'm ready to take on whatever the endeavor is. It could be a college presidency, it could be a principalship, it could be really anything. And the reason that I have that confidence is because I know how to walk into the next step of something without necessarily even seeing the next step. So I remember during my data collection phase, and you find out all the different things that you maybe didn't know. What happens if I can't find enough participants? Or, how do I streamline my interviews? How do I make sure that everything lasts the length of time that it's supposed to? How do I, when I'm writing, how do I make sure that my writing is on a top tier or on point enough level to where I'm not doing 3, 4 rounds of revisions? And so I think that just that confidence of knowing that no matter what the endeavor is or no matter what the task is, I have the resilience and the perseverance to go and not only figure it out, but figure it out how to do it at a high level, figure out multiple perspectives on it, and then do it to the best of my ability. And so I really think that that the doctoral journey, it does change you just because you've had a variety of experiences and you've dealt with, I guess you would say, you've dealt with situations that you're unsure of. You've dealt with situations where you have to maybe, just like I was saying before, kind of strategically figure things out. And I think that that maybe was even more important than the coursework that I took. I think that the research and writing, that was definitely something new for me. I've never worked on a project that was that long. My dissertation was 318 pages. And so, I'd never worked on anything that long. I had never, even had a document that I had looked at that was that big. And so it was a very good experience, very exciting and insightful experience. And I think that really, just that ability to persevere and go through different challenges and different unforeseen circumstances, I think that that was the biggest thing that I took away from it. Just knowing that whatever it was, that I could actually do it. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. And there's two things I want to unpack from this that you shared. I mean, the first one is that you were a full time working professional while pursuing this, which is common for some folks going through something like this, not common for everybody. There are some doctoral programs when you are a full time student, which is things to think about. I want to get super practical on this. Like how did you successfully manage that? Like it's a lot. It's a lot when you're working and then you have the classes and then you have writing and then you have life and other priorities. Like what are some practical tips that you might be able to share around how you sort of manage the highs and lows?
so the first thing that I would say is definitely how you have things structured, your time management. And so working as a teacher, the schedule, it does have, you get off work at an early enough time to still have some flexibility in what you're doing after work. I also would say that, just time management is very, very crucial. Your ability to, I'm not going to say be tied to your computer because I don't think that it's that, but your ability to concentrate and focus on whatever you need to at the time for your doctorate. And so, sometimes that could be like, I have a sauna here. And so sometimes I would just sit in the sauna, for an hour and just think about, okay, how do I accomplish this part of this goal? Or how do I, get through this obstacle or get through this barrier, or what am I going to do if this happens or if that happens? And I think that thinking about it and concentrating and thinking about, you know, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and just really having a game plan. I mean, even like you were saying for your data collection or for how you're writing or anything, these are all very, very important key details of, I feel like, doctoral survival, right? I remember I created like a checklist when I would do my interviews and focus groups. I had my questions all laminated so that I always knew exactly where I was. I would make notes on my paperwork to kind of, even more personal notes for me. Slow down, stop talking so fast, stop butting in, like, just all the little key details that I think are part of it. And I think that, kind of like I had said before, everything really is everything. And so those same things that had helped me, maybe let's say as a professional being a teacher, I think that the things that helped me be a teacher and the influence of systems that helped me be a really effective basketball coach, knowing like, okay, well, if you're coaching basketball, that's really teaching basketball, and the assessment of if you're a good team or if you're a good coach would be the games. And so if you're winning games, people are excited and happy. And so how can we win more games strategically? What are what are colleges doing to win more games? What are top tier high schools doing to win more games? Who are the best researchers in basketball? What are the kind of cutting edge strategies that are happening, within that industry? And I think that those same systems that took me from teaching to being an effective coach, it was the same thing with teaching dance or with being an instructional leader, and the same thing within my doctoral programs, just knowing how to create systems, develop systems, and implement systems, and evaluate your systems to make sure that they're actually working. And I think that those were very, very key tactics in surviving my doctoral program. So,
Wow. Love those. I mean, I think something that you've mentioned again and again that I haven't really chatted with people about is this idea of project management and thinking about it that way. Like you are managing a project and it's you. Like, yeah, you have some people who are going to help you and et cetera, et cetera. But like at the end of the day, you're managing a project and like, you have to be very diligent on that. It's a skill set and you can develop it. And, you mentioned time management as part of that. What I really appreciate you sharing is like this moment of like just sitting in a sauna and thinking. Like, I think what can be taken for granted is just giving yourself a moment to think. Like, instead of being facing the books or on the computer and looking for more and writing more and just doing and doing and doing. Like, there's such a time and a place for just being and like soaking in and like kind of giving yourself like some space. Like, I'm sure there's some sort of neurochemical explanation for this, but I feel like that's so key that you highlighted. So I appreciate these. To me, I feel like these are very practical things that folks can be doing. So, oh yeah.
One of the things that I kind of wanted to jump in and say with that too. So I think that if there was one like major piece of advice that I could give for a doctoral student, just in terms of their mindset, is really just understanding that your experience is your experience. And so, I have, I guess you would say, an aunt by marriage that, she got her doctorate from USC. I had other resources such as yourself, such as Dr. Ghazi. And the whole thing that I learned through that process was that everyone's experience is their experience, and each school does things totally different. And so, what one school may consider to be perfect, top tier publishable work, another school may say, we don't really know about that, or we want you to do it this way, or even some schools, like you were saying, some schools do a cohort style of program in which you have other people that you've shared this experience with for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, versus when you're going through this experience completely by yourself. And even if you're having, committee changes and changes in who is leading you through this project, that also is a very different element. And so, I would say the biggest piece of advice that I could give someone doing a doctoral program, or if someone feels like they are stuck or feels like they're lost, I think that the best piece of advice that I have, it actually did come from it came from an advisor or dissertation chair, but what I did was I expanded on it. And what they told me to do was to go look at dissertations from, the school that I was at, Grand Canyon University. And so I took that advice, and what I did was I found, I believe, about 10 to 15 different qualitative descriptive studies that came from Grand Canyon University within the last 3 years. And once I had that helped me out tremendously. Just really, and not only getting the dissertations, but looking at them and evaluating them on a very micro level. How many periods go here? How did they do the APA in-text citation versus on the reference page? How did they describe things like saturation? All of the different pieces that are part of it, I felt like it was a lot easier to see when I was looking at dissertations specifically from my school, and specifically that had finished recently. Just because I had looked at dissertations from other schools and seen different things, or I had looked at other resources and other things, and just having that clarity, I feel like, is extremely important. Just because, just like you said, I mean, a dissertation, it's the type of work where if you so okay, so going back to mindset. So I always have believed that you kind of have two or three different mindsets. So you have one person who, before they start building out their IKEA furniture, they're looking at every piece of instruction. They're making sure they have every tool that they need. They have every Allen wrench. They have every screw. Then you kind of have other people that when they see that box, they just open it up and start going, right? Then you maybe have other people that are kind of waiting for someone to tell them which direction to go or what to do. And so I think that for me, I started my program as somebody who I always would just, okay, here's my IKEA box, just open it up. Okay, that looks like it goes there, that looks like it goes there. And in a doctoral program, that can hurt you because you could work on something for a month or a few months just to figure out that you didn't do it correctly. And so I remember with my literature review, the first, I guess you would say, the first draft of my literature review, and realizing that I had written about 55 pages or so completely incorrectly, and my synthesis was not actually synthesis. And so when I got it back, I had to understand, okay, so this is how you messed up. It's okay. It's not a big deal, but this is what you need to do to go and fix it. And so just kind of going back to explaining things the way that I was inspired from what you had said, it is very important to really understand and know what you're getting into. You need to understand your school's policies and procedures for writing a dissertation. What does it mean to be in the proposal phase? What does it mean to be in the prospectus phase? What does it mean to, have your first three chapters done versus chapters 1 through 5? All of these things are very important and they're going to differ institution to institution. And then the second thing, like I said, just that understanding of the physical dissertation and what it looks like and how it's made, and knowing that that's going to be different school to school. And so you really need to get some samples and really spend time with them.
Mhm.
Really read the dissertation. Don't just, I skimmed it. Oh, I looked at their, their outline. Oh, I looked at their introduction. You need to really know the dissertation, not just look at it. And I think that that's very key. I know that one of the other interviews from your channel that I had watched, I remember hearing he explained it in such a great philosophical way. He was saying that people will want their doctorate, and I think he was alluding to it's like somebody wanting to get their doctorate but not doing the dissertation is kind of like wanting to be a parent but not having the baby that comes with it. It is a living, breathing, thing that you did, and it is going to, that experience as well as your work, that should be something that for the rest of your life is kind of, something that you draw back on. It probably is something that's one of the more difficult things that you're really ever going to do. And I think that, just like I was saying, I started completely naive, not really understanding, what I was getting into or the seriousness of some of these different things. And, I found myself in a sink or swim type of situation. And luckily, I mean, we were lifeguards and swim instructors, so we could swim, but I do realize that that was a very
Mm.
taxing piece of that experience. And so,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's the
Wow.
advice I would give to people.
I love it. I mean, I just feel like you just provided such a clear framework plan for somebody. I mean, whether you're even thinking about a dissertation, where you are in your dissertation. I mean, like step one, like look at dissertations from your institution. I mean, you're looking at the answer key, right? Like, and on that, like you're also just building knowledge, your understanding. But it's so simple, and yet like I'm sure you could ask so many people who are in the process going through it. It was like, have you ever done it? And they're probably like, no. Like I thankfully I had a instructor who had us do this, but if not for her, like maybe I wouldn't have actually looked at dissertations from my institution. I mean, I think that's key too. Like I think we were just looking at dissertations, but from your institution is so important. And then from that, like prepping as much as you can, understanding the process as much as you can, so that ideally you're in a situation where you're not having to start from scratch, but rather you're just having to tweak and adjust here and there. But I think by looking at a dissertation from your institution, it's a very clear direction outcome of what you're looking to essentially produce with your unique fingerprint on it. So I love this.
Well, and
um
I was gonna say, because you've gotten my brain back into the doctoral mode, and I
yeah.
think that another cheat code, and this is probably for some of your more advanced, listeners. I think that another key thing that you could do that I was able to kind of do within my dissertation was, at a point from looking at all the research out there, you will kind of figure out who are some of the top premier people within different industries and different, I guess you would say, research areas. And so for me, I was able to make connections and start building a network of just really high esteemed professionals based on looking at their research and citing their research within my dissertation as well. And so I think that that is a very, very key thing. When you're able to say, okay, these are people, this is a person, or this is an organization or a group of people that in the future I want to work with, or I would like to do research with, or have some type of professional relationship with, and being able to use their research to help, develop your research, I feel like is very key, because that creates new conversations that you can have with them. It's totally different when someone says, "Oh, hey, like it's great to meet you," versus, "Hey, it's great to meet you, and I've actually read and utilized and applied your research. So now
Mhm.
maybe we can, move to that next level of research, or collaborate on this or collaborate on that." And I think that that is a very key element as well. And so,
Yeah. The picture that you're drawing here, I just think is so fundamental to understanding that you somebody once told me that like in your dissertation or any research that you're doing to remember that you're entering into a conversation that has already been going on. And so I think this is kind of what you're indicating here or touching on is that these are, unless you're citing some very foundational like research where that person is no longer here, like you're citing people that are real people who are interested in the things that you're interested in. And it's that opportunity to network with them and know that they're real people and connect with them, understand what they're really doing, and that you're entering into this community through your research. Like it might not feel like it because you're writing a paper and you're at your desk and you're alone. But at the end of the day, if you went to a conference on this topic, like you would know those people. Oh, yeah, I cited you. And it can just feel like text, but it's much more than that. And I think that's something that we can get lost, we can lose. And so I appreciate you kind of highlighting that. I think it's so important.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I know that I know that you said that or I know that you said earlier within when we were talking that one of the things that you always ask about is kind of book recommendations. And I think that one of the biggest books that I had used to kind of get through my doctorate program, it was this book called Being Bright is Not Enough, The Unwritten Rules of Doctoral Study by Peggy Hawley. It is this book here. And I'm not exactly sure if it's the title that got to me the most or anything that I actually took out of the book as just real authentic knowledge. But I think that if I was kind of passing some knowledge, I would say that doctoral studies, doctoral programs, being bright is not enough. Being a great typer is not enough. Being a great presenter is not enough. It is the whole package. It is the whole, I guess you would say, system of skills in comparison to just one. I definitely can type a little bit faster after, being in a doctoral program for 7.5 years or so. But I feel like the biggest thing was really just strategy and also perseverance and resilience. When you run into a problem, are you going to let that problem derail what your goals are, what your future should be like, what your vision is, or are you going to use that barrier as an opportunity to just improve, an opportunity to learn something new, an opportunity to just take it as a learning experience. And I think that even though, 7.5 years may have been significantly longer than I had wanted to experience, I also understand that that's a unique experience that I can use to take into my professional experiences and take into professional settings and kind of kind of something that I can wear as well as like you went through that. You had that experience and only you know what that's like to go through or only you learned those skills that you learned at that time. And so I think that was really key too. Just understanding that it's not just going to be about am I an extremely bright person. It's like, well, being bright will help you, but it's going to be about strategy, and strategy is very very important. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, in true leadership fashion, I feel like you already answered our signature questions and got to it for the book recommendation and the advice to your younger self. So I guess the final question that I want to ask you is, as we're sort of getting to time here, uh, what's next for you? What are you excited about? What are you working on? What can you share with the audience?
So currently I'm working in a lot of different directions. So I think that there's still some I guess you would say aspects of higher education that I'm learning more and more about. And so when I finished my doctoral program, I was not necessarily right away like, now that I'm done, I have to go find something new to go do. I didn't really want to do that. I also felt like I needed some cool off time from my doctoral program. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of effort. It was a lot of concentration. And so I'm still, currently working as a teacher. I also do a lot of work within the teacher union. So let's see, I'm on the scholarship committee, the equity committee, the ad hoc committee, the secondary education committee. I'm also on the CTA. So CTA is the teacher union on the state level. So the CTA, I guess it's the African American Caucus, and my position is also the seventh and eighth grade executive board representative. And so learning a lot of different things about, really how education works from like kind of a more corporate or administrative purview through that work. And I'm also looking to pursue some different certifications, possibly within higher education. So kind of fine tuning some of the skills that I don't get within my normal K through 12 job. So maybe things like understanding enrollment, things like better understanding funding and budgeting, and some of those aspects I think would be crucial to continue to study. And then also getting into some consulting. So I know that for me, I worked with some consultants during my doctoral experience, and that was a massive benefit and massive help. Even though it was a very pricey option, a pricey, thing to do, it really did add reassurance and peace of mind to kind of have other people that were specialized within, doctorate programs, doctoral education that, you could speak to and really get their advice and get their insight on. And, just like I was saying, some of these things, they are pricey, but it is worth it. I know that for me, even while I was going through my program, that was a big thing. I was working full time as a teacher, and then I was also sometimes I was officiating water polo games after school and on the weekends, or sometimes I was refereeing or officiating wrestling tournaments, officiating basketball games and basketball tournaments. And part of that was always so that, if I needed a little bit of extra cash to buy this program for my doctorate, then that's something that I may need to do. Or if I needed to get a subscription to Max QDA, if I needed to get, a subscription to one of the approved AI type of technologies like a Grammarly, if I needed to, find an editor, if I needed to have a one-on-one conversation with a coach, I felt like all of those things were very, very key just because it is a very stressful thing to get your doctorate. Just like we said before, entering a doctorate program, a lot of people enter, and I think that nobody leaves unscathed. I don't think that anybody can truly say that when they started to when they, whether they left the program or whether they finished the program, I don't think anybody can say that they stayed the same. You're going to learn, you're going to have experiences. But the thing is I think how you internalize those experiences. Do you let those experiences, if it's not the experience you wanted, do you let it negatively impact you, or do you use that as a growth opportunity? And I think that as long as you're growing from these things, that it'll continue to help you no matter which direction you go into. And I think that
Mhm.
that's key as well. But I also, just like I was saying, getting into some consulting, starting some services for doctoral students, starting some services for possibly parents, possibly school districts, and then also just maybe college students in general, I think are really important. And I think that really just having a focus on educational equity and finding ways to ensure that all students at all levels are actually learning and not just going through experiences, right? Not just going to class, not just getting a diploma or getting a degree, but making sure that the actual learning that takes place is beneficial and impactful for our communities. Because I think that my participation as a union level or union executive board level representative, as a doctoral student, as a teacher, it really is rooted in community. Understanding that, when we see these things about levels of success of teachers, or when we see these things about the negative levels of learning or negative graduation rates that are happening in our communities, it's realizing that those are real people in our real communities that are living here too. And so if we're not teaching students and we're not giving them, economic opportunities in their future, then we're kind of setting things up for our communities to not be economically valuable in the future. We're setting ourselves up for people who are in our communities that don't have the opportunity to really live with the level of freedom that they want, or live with the opportunities to do what they want or own the things that they want to. And I think that that's where things can become difficult. And so really just realizing that it's all rooted in community, and understanding that, our purpose is helping other people and helping the community get what it needs, so that, everyone prospers, and not just those who have crazy resources, or not just those who have, networking and maybe connections to other people who can get them in position, but really just creating fair and equitable opportunities so that, every single person, in Elk Grove or the places that I'm serving, that they have an opportunity to, to learn in this instance or to get what they want to get out of it. And so I think that if there's anything that I kind of leave as an impact, I think that that would be the biggest thing. Is just really making sure that whatever it is that the mission and vision statement are, that we actually are adhering to those things. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So amazing. Yeah. Sorry.
Or no, and I was just gonna say it's truly been a pleasure to be on this podcast and to work with you on this. This has been very, very cool. So.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Lauren, thank you so much for coming on, for just sharing your story, your journey, for sharing so many practical tips, tools, mindsets. I mean, so much greatness here. We're super excited for what you continue to do and the impact that you continue to have. So, before we wrap up, where can people follow you or connect with you? Where's the best place for that?
I would say to follow or connect with me at the current moment, I would say LinkedIn. So just LinkedIn and then Doctor and then the dash or like the kind of like the minus sign Carter. Or if you would like to send me kind of like an email or if you would like to kind of collaborate more directly through email, then it would be drcarteredd@gmail.com. And so those would be the main two ways to connect.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lauren. So great chatting with you.
Absolutely. Great to see you. And I hope to see you soon.
Yeah, likewise. What a fun conversation with Dr. Lawrence Carter. As I mentioned, we have known each other for years and years. And so it's just super amazing to see what he's doing now. I think Lawrence has an amazing way of articulating these complex kind of PhD concepts or tips or things that we should be doing, insights, etc., into sort of easy to understand ways. And so I just really appreciate his perspective and am super excited for the work that he has ahead of himself. So I hope you were inspired by something. What resonated with you the most? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So please drop me a message or a comment. And thank you so much for tuning in to Connected. You can find all of the links in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, to leave a review, and share it with somebody in your PhD community. And be sure to follow along on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube for more conversations just like this. So I will see you next time, and let's stay connected.